So if you're ever down in the dumps due to a small oversight, remember that at least yours didn't result in the complete redesign of hundreds of thousands of game pieces, and know that it can always be worse. But now it is once again time for us to cross over into another milestone, as we have officially entered the 100 Club. Games that will take you more than 4 days to complete if you played them continuously without breaks. Meaning we have finally reached the titles that are impossible to finish without drinking water, as you would quite literally die before you can reach the end game. Our first title up to bat brings us right back over to Europe as we take up the good fight in Empires in Arms. Literally the first normal board game title we've had since the car game. Empires in Arms take place during the Napoleonic Wars as you and your friends take charge of one of the 7 major European powers. Use the full might of your military to take control and ensure your survival. EA is more heavily focused on the combat than the other European war games, but still carries the full diplomatic process, splitting turns into 4 phases that divvies up both negotiations and military movements, with an extra economic phase being added every 3 turns. Each turn represents 1 month on the calendar, and scenarios range from a 4-turn short battle to the 132-turn full campaign, which can run you anywhere from 100 to 150 hours based on how quickly you can get through a turn. But while the military section is the main aspect, the diplomatic process has had a ton of work poured into it, as you need to maneuver through mechanics like alliances based around marriages and the nobility, different types of war declarations that will cause different political impacts, and a political status system that encourages players to impose the greatness of their nations in ways other than through warfare. If all of this sounds like it belongs inside of a computer game, then you've almost got it, as instead of putting these rules inside of a computer, they've put a computer inside of the rules. These mad lads have somehow implemented a specific section of the rulebook that dictates realistic movements and actions of non-player controlled nations, meaning you can play with all 7 major nations even if you only have 3 players. In other words, they added CPU-controlled players to a game made out of cardboard and paper. All of this nonsense put together results in a very well-received title, with reviews that place it as one of the best monster war games available to the public. I wanted to say that it has a great replayability value to it as well, but if you just play the main scenario once, that should keep you occupied for a couple months at the minimum. But what are these paltry land claims that we are going for? Europe? America? Nah, I'm gonna go higher. It's time to take this fight Mr. Worldwide with World in Flames. I really have nothing to say here. Completely infallible box design. Wouldn't change a thing. Balls. World in Flames puts players through the entirety of World War II as they take control of their nations to try to win the war for their side. Now you might be thinking, wow, a war game that takes place during World War II? What a shocker. It's not like that's the single most represented war in the entire medium. So what separates World in Flames from the literal thousands of other games based around the same thing? Well, as a starter, this one will let you do whatever you gosh dang please. Want to wage war in Europe? Expected. Want to wage war in the Pacific? Go ahead. Want to drop an atom bomb on Italy? We literally cannot stop you. Anything you want to do, you can, as long as you set yourself up with the necessary support for that decision. But you have all of the power to put yourself in the position to do this, as you get full control over the entire industrial process within your country. But while you might have the resources to construct something, they won't just be churned out like you spent gems for a speed up, as everything needs both the ingredients and the time to cook up properly. This will force you to plan weeks in advance for some of your more ambitious projects, as producing assets like a single aircraft carrier will take 12 turns to put together. And when I say plan weeks in advance, I mean it, as this thing posts a minimum playtime of 100 hours, and I have seen multiple sources mention that the best way to approach the full campaign is to meet up once a week to play 1 turn each time. And get this, if you played that way, you would finish 1 full game in as little as 1 year. It would take you around 3 real-world months to put together one aircraft carrier. So it is going to be immensely satisfying to see the stylish plan you formulated back in January finally come to fruition for a devastating blow in mid-July. The amount of foresight a player needs to have if they want to stand a chance of putting a competent effort together is frankly absurd. But hey, the players love it. The game is ranked higher than even Empires in Arms, and managed to secure the 1985 Charles S. Roberts Award for Best 20th Century Game. In fact, the biggest negative for the game isn't even about the gameplay. It's about how unwieldy it is. Carrying 5 separate maps and expansions that add other nations to the fray, you will need at the minimum an 8-foot long table to even lay this thing down. Otherwise, you're going to have to hang it on your wall. I would say that you can just place it on the floor, but the ants in your apartment might find their way onto there. And I don't know about you, but I think ants learning complex military strategy is not a problem that the world needs to be dealing with right now. Unfortunately for the ants, you can only learn so much from the war games that we have covered so far, as while they can help you learn the intricacies of combat on land and sometimes sea, you will be left with a noticeable gap in your sub-oceanic capabilities. Well, no more, as there's a war game out there that will help fill that hole, as it has decided to fill the niche everyone is clamoring for. World War II Submarine Warfare. Whatever, man. I wouldn't be surprised if they've got a war game based around a lawn dispute between two neighbors. Average playtime, minimum 30 hours. Silent War. In Silent War, players take control of the American submarine fleet as they wage an underwater assault against the Japanese. Manage your fleet and plan out your movements to secure the victories needed to keep your country afloat. Unlike the other games we've covered, this one is actually proud of its simplicity. It even advertises how easy its rules are to get through as, quote, "The rules will have the player running his first submarine patrol within 45 minutes of opening the game box." Thank goodness! My least favorite part of Chutes and Ladders was the 2 hours I have to spend just reading through the rulebook. No surprise here that the game is just as complicated as the other titles that surround it. But what is surprising is the actions that you get up to in this title. See, in the other war games, you are the king or commander of some great military force. But in Silent War, you are not directly commanding your fleet of submarines, you are managing them. Each of your subs comes equipped with their own captains and crews, and they are going to be the ones making the game time decisions. Meanwhile, you will be handling all of the administrative tasks, like determining transit routes, patrol orders, submarine repairs and improvements, all of the exciting bookwork that every bureaucrat gets hyped for. Let's go! On top of that, the battles that your captains get up to are, by themselves, pretty much inconsequential, as the game is so long and wide-spanning that any one single loss of ship or sub from either side means practically nothing on its own. As a result, your main goal is to acquire as many minuscule victories over a massive period of time that will eventually grow into a felt difference made on your side. Real inspiring stuff there. But if the standard clerical work wasn't barn-igniting enough for you, then enhance your experience with some of these special rules on offer. We've got American torpedo improvements, wolf packs, patrols and searches, merchant shipping, Japanese battle doctrines, and even rules made for 2 players. Oh, that's cool. So instead of playing with 3 or 4, you can do a co-op with a friend. Oh, you've got it backwards. It doesn't bring the game down into a co-op format, it adds a co-op format. Oh, so they're psychotic. Good to know. This game takes 125 hours to get through and was designed to be played completely alone. On top of that, the main gameplay is simulating clerical work, so it has decided to undertake the task of making a game that is boring, but in a good way? Look at how hard this game is to describe. Here are some quotes from Amnese's favorable review of the game where he is trying to convince people to try out the title. It is generally a very dry simulation. It could potentially be very boring and disappointing if you were expecting something more fast-paced, exciting, and tense. There's not a lot of excitement or tough decision-making that often characterizes other war games. If you enjoy watching voting results slowly trickling in over hours on election night, then this is your type of game. Oh dang it, that's me. It was made for me. This game is an anomaly. It has decided to forego exciting game mechanics to instead focus on minor decisions that don't show their effects until literal months later, legitimately leaving the player with the least interesting part of the gameplay on purpose. And the worst part is, I can genuinely see myself enjoying this title, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. But now for the moment you are all here for, as we move on to our final game. A title that occupies a category all of its own, as it is longer than every other title we have previously covered, combined by several weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the unmatched champion of length and complexity, the magnum opus of Richard Berg himself, the campaign for North Africa, The Desert War, 1940 to 43. TCFNA TDW 40 to 43 is what you get when you combine a World War II fascination with a severe case of undiagnosed brain melt. Up here, there's no screw loose. An entire bolt has gone missing. Waddle around North Africa doing something war-related. Whichever player dies of old age first loses. The campaign for North Africa has garnered quite the reputation in the board gaming scene due to its length, which led it to be the very first game ever covered on this channel. So to detail how long the game takes, let's use that video for reference. I posted the original North Africa video in March of 2022, or 2.6 years ago. Now, you are aware that this is a long game, so you and your friends set up a schedule in advance. You would play twice a month for 3 hours at a time, about a small D&D quest every other week. If you had started playing the second that original video was uploaded, you will have completed 13% of one full game at this point in time. If you play through on this scheduling method, you would finish one game in approximately 20 years. But let's approach this from a different angle. The previously covered Freedom in the Galaxy, The Star Rebellion's 5764 AD has an average estimated playtime of around 1200 minutes. While the campaign for North Africa, The Desert War 1940 to 43 has a similar average estimated playtime of around 1200 hours. The completed game map itself is completely bonkers. It is a little under 3 feet wide and a crisp 9.5 feet long. That is 9 feet, 6 inches, 3 entire meters. Numbers so unbelievable it's got me using the metric system. Finally found yourself a 10-foot long table that can hold this monster? Good! Find a longer one, because you're going to need the extra space for the 322 pages worth of rulebooks that you will constantly need to be referencing in order to get through any of the moves. Also discover some space for the 12 logistical sheets and the pencils that you will use to mark on them, because if you play this game using a pen, you're a dead man. Alongside all of this, make way for the 3 storage trays that will be used to hold the 1800 counters used during gameplay. And for the cherry on top, the game also includes 1 6-sided die, because, and I cannot express this enough, screw you! But while this was all covered in the previous run-through, there was one part of the title that I was never able to figure out until now. How to actually play the thing. Yes, I have cracked the code and can now finally relay to you exactly what you can look forward to if you decide to take on this behemoth. 95% paperwork. Comparing Silent War to this is like filling out a permission slip versus doing Coke's entire year in payroll by hand. The best descriptor for this is Michael Taylor's outline for what you need to do in order to move one division unit one time. Locate the org chart for that division. Ensure that there is enough fuel and water to allow movement. Move the unit. Count capability points, a measure of what the unit can do in a turn, and breakdown points, the two are different, as you go. Calculate fuel usage. Different vehicles have different fuel usage rates. Calculate water usage. Subtract fuel and water used from the total available for the division. Tally total breakdown points. Roll against the breakdown chart for each type of vehicle in the division. Remove any broken vehicles from the org chart for the division and place a counter on the map representing them. Note these broken down vehicles on the broken down vehicle sheet and breathe. You need to do all of this anytime you move any of your units at all. And these are just standard land divisions. Stuff like tanks or other specialty vehicles have even more rules to follow, and don't even bother trying to get a plane into the air. Again, all of that was just to move a unit forward. To complete a full turn, you will need to work through every single process on the following list. Plan strategic air missions, raid Malta, plan Axis convoys, raid convoys, distribute stores and consume stores, calculate spillage and evaporation of water and adjust all supply dumps, determine initiative, determine weather, hotter weather results in more evaporation of water, distribute water, reorganize units, calculate attrition of units short of water in stores, begin building construction, begin training, rearrange supplies, transport cargo between African ports, bring convoys ashore, deploy Commonwealth fleet, ship repair, plan tactical air mission if airplanes are fueled, begin air mission, which includes fighting air-to-air combat, firing flak, carrying out missions, returning to base, and airplane maintenance. Place land units on reserve. Now you can finally move! Move units, tracking fuel expenditure and breakdown points via weather, enemy reaction, and move more units. Now you can actually fight! Designate each tank and gun as deployed forward or back, plot and fire barrages, retreat before assault, secretly assign all units to anti-armor or close assault roles, anti-armor fire, adjust ammunition, deploy destroyed tank markers and update unit records to reflect losses, and carry out probes and close assaults. After that's done, you can release reserves, move all rear trucks, begin repair of breakdowns, make patrols, then repeat all movement and combat steps a second time, then repeat all movement and combat steps a third time. This entire sequence would then be repeated by the other player or team, completing one game turn. There are 100 turns in the full campaign, and there has still never been a documented case of someone actually finishing it. With all of that nonsense, you would think there'd be nothing left to talk about here. But with how deep the game is, I wanted to make sure that not a crumb of whack crap slid through the cracks. So I went online, dug around for a bit, and found a full copy of the rulebooks. I've highlighted my favorite parts, so let's go through them together. To give you an idea on how this will work, the rules are split up into numbers to sort topics, segments of those topics, then subsegments of those segments, because otherwise this thing would just be a New York Times best-selling novel. I'll read off the sorting number to showcase where we are currently at from topics 1 to 65, then describe the part that caught my eye. Ready? 3, 2, 1, run it! Alrighty, literally haven't even left the title page, and they need to include a section on how to learn how to play the game. Great start. A flag of bright crimson. 1.0 Introduction. It should be stated here that although the rules are quite long, CNA is quite an easy game to explain to somebody. Oh, awesome. By the end of this then, everyone should be able to jump right into a game. 2.3. 2 years of playtesting were put into this game, and they were not able to finish a single run-through, just to remind you what we're dealing with here. 2.4. Playing time. Each game turn takes around 10 hours. One turn of this thing is longer than the first 3 games that we covered. 5.26 End of game turn. You have now completed 1 game turn, a full week of the real campaign. Take a breather, have a beer and a sandwich, contact your loved ones to let them know you're still alive, and return for another game turn. 8.4 Special terrain effects on movement. Literally every hex in the game has some type of terrain effect, bringing special problems to both player and designer. 8.5 Reaction. Reaction is the capability of a unit to get out of the way. 8.71 Rail movement. The Saluj Benghazi Bars rail line is on the game board solely for historical purposes. It may not be used for anything and has no effect whatsoever on terrain or movement. 11.36 No way this man just used the word behoove. 15.88 A player may always voluntarily surrender their units rather than have them slaughtered. Yeah, okay, but where's the fun in that? 17.25 If both units, for some strange reason, both surrender at the same time, the surrenders are ignored and nothing happens. 17.3 Training. Axis units do not need to train because they are already acclimated to the warfare in the area. The Italians' reasoning for this is, as for the Italians, most of these units had served in Africa, had seen combat, or are too low a designated morale to bother with training. 19. Organization and reorganization. Important. The players are being forced to mold to use their armies in much the same way as the commanders did 30 plus years ago. And if it frustrates the player to not be able to do things that are clearly beneficial, imagine how it was to those actually fighting this campaign. Just 21 and 22 in general, you can probably make a killing off of destroying your opponent's tanks, dragging them back to a repair station, fixing them, and then sending them back out on your side. There is nothing stopping you from doing that. 23.13, in case you are wondering, yes, the Commonwealth 1SA road construction unit can only be used for road work. We pavers played a big part in this effort, don't you know? 24.6. The defunct Benghazi-Bars rail line has been included for historical purposes only and may never be used for any reason, just in case you forgot. 27.2. Desert Raiders and Commandos contains an entire rule segment for the Die Sonderkommando Almasi, the German Desert Raider group. 28. Prisoners! Prisoners cannot be massacred. We do not condone war crimes here. Take that nonsense back to Candyland. 28.23. Prisoners can escape from capture if some requirements are met, but quote, there are no organized prison breaks here. This is Africa, not Colditz. 29. 7 different rules and 20 different sub-rules just for determining the weather. 31. An entire rule system dedicated to just Rommel. He gets his own cool little counter, and yes, you can try to assassinate him. 32. Abstract logistics and air rules. There is a section here that includes a simplified version of the air game rules of play. A reminder that Richard Berg himself was asked about his full flight system, and he said that it, quote, sucks. The simpler air rules mentioned here are meant to make it easier to work through and should cut the total playing time in half from endless to simply horrendous. As a result, I will be completely ignoring these, because if you think I'm going to sit down for this and then play on easy mode, you've lost it as much as I have. 33 through 47, the air game rules of play. I could attempt to describe to you what I have just read through, but I find it much easier to describe that you need to manage the fuel, condition, fitting and refitting, loading and arming, tracking of ammunition, and the forming of routes for every single aircraft. Alongside this, you will also need to keep track of every single pilot of every single plane separately. Don't even bother. Berg was spot on here. The logistics rules of play. What's your favorite flavor of logistics? Mine is fuel. 48. Sequence of play. An entire page of rules on just the order that the supplies get distributed at the start of every turn. 49.17 Fuel. In an emergency, players may siphon gas from theirs or an enemy's vehicle, but cannot do it on vehicles that have been destroyed. 49.2 Walking infantry may never transport fuel. Quote, how would you like to cross the desert carrying a 20-pound jerry can filled with gasoline? Well, I wouldn't, Rich, but I also am not currently at war. Oh, an absolute classic here, 49.3 Fuel Evaporation. Each player reduces all fuel levels on the map by 6% due to evaporation, with an additional 5% leaving in hot weather. However, there is one exception to this. For this 11-month period, the Commonwealth evaporation rate starts at 9% per turn. Because during this time period in the actual war, the British used poorly constructed fuel containers before stealing the German jerry can design, so now you have to deal with that as well. 51.23 Stores. A player in desperate straits may place their units on half rations, but cannot do this just to hoard their food supply. They actually need to be running out of food. 52.16 Water. Wells of water may be poisoned, which is a technical term for pouring a buttload of salt into them to pretty much ruin them. Remember, no war crimes here. This is not Connect 4. There it is, it's here. 52.6, the Italian pasta rule. Strap yourselves in, I'm reading the entire thing. One of the biggest mistakes the Italians made during the entire desert campaign was to provide their troops with a diet that was composed, in large part, of spaghetti and macaroni. Aside from providing insufficient protein, this wasn't Boy Tony brand. Pasta has one serious drawback in the desert. You need water to cook it. Therefore, each Italian battalion, when it receives its stores, must receive an additional 1 point of water when stores are distributed. A pasta point, if you will. Any battalion-sized unit that does not receive their pasta point may not voluntarily exceed their CPA that turn. Furthermore, Italian battalions not receiving their pasta point that have a cohesion level of -10 or worse immediately become disorganized as if they have reached -26. As soon as such units get their pasta point, they regain the original cohesion level. Fun fact, Richard Berg completely made this up. 64.76 Scenario 5, the full campaign. Once you reach the end of the full campaign, something that still has never been recorded, you can tally your victory points. And if you get an even ratio of 1-to-1 with your opponent, the official level of the victory result is draw. My god, what a waste of time! Here are some of the designer's notes from the end of the rulebook. Over 2 years were spent researching information for the game, resulting in a bunch of topics that ended up going unused. One thing the task force was provided during the search was a complete list of German bakery companies that were present during the conflict. And Berg said that the temptation to use them was great. Berg designed the entire movement system just to prove a point, that mobile units were more powerful not because they had more combat points, but because they were more mobile. Just look at what this man has to say about designing the air system. He hates it so much. Some quotes from the best paragraph in the entire segment. The main question with CNA is, why? I did CNA as a definitive and informationally overpowering simulation because I wanted to see how far I could take simulation gaming and still survive. CNA is virtually unplayable as a game. One does not play CNA, one immerses himself in it. Some of you will no doubt drown. Most of you will just tread water. But a few of you will find the swim refreshing. Finally, the man ends this, may I remind you, rulebook for a board game with a completed bibliography section citing every source he used for the historical information. I thought I had experienced it all. I thought I was ready for anything. Then he hit me with the works cited page and I lost my gosh dang mind. One does not craft a project like this out of an obligation or as an assignment. This was a pure passion project from a man that had a vision and ignored every single landmine along the road until he had finished it. This is, without a doubt, one of the worst board games of all time. A game designed with the intention to never be finished cannot be considered a good game. On top of the fact that I just read through the entire effing rulebook, and I still don't know how to play. But it is the way it is because it was never meant to be consumed as a board game. It was at the very least meant to be some form of educational tool about the conflict that took place during this time period. And for the more committed audience, it was meant to put you through a fractional amount of the same frustrations that these men had to deal with during the actual campaign. This title is one of the most impressive pieces ever put out into the market. Just the fact that it was finished at all is a miracle, and really shows the dedication and resiliency of the designer and his team to put together one of the most beautifully horrific games I have ever laid my eyes on. This is not a board game. This is not a war game. This is the Campaign for North Africa, the Desert War, 1940 to 43. And I look forward to the day when a team with just as much dedication as the man himself can rise up to the multi-year-long challenge and finish this monster for the first time ever. To send us off, one last section from the rulebook. 65 in conclusion. The amount of work put into the game was enormous. The amount of information available is almost mind-boggling. We hope that the amount of fun is just as great. Signing off for a genuine piece of artwork, I am KamSandwich. Thank you for watching, and have a fantastic day. A special thank you to my suppliers, staff, and chefs over at the deli. If you'd like to join the crew, you can take a look using the link in the description below.